Two big developments in the last hour regarding the Phala Phala report. The President has filed papers with the Constitutional Court to review that report, but found he may have a case to answer regarding the foreign currency stolen from his farm in 2020. And then the news, as you've just heard, from the ANC's National Executive Committee, that the party will vote against taking that report forward to establish an impeachment committee. So let's speak now to political analyst and host of On the Spot here on eNCA, Lukhona Mnguni. Lukhona, thank you so much for holding on. And you're on a telephone line because you're being load shed, so thank you very much for prevailing. Really, one question, is this report, from a parliamentary point of view, dead in the water, given these two big decisions?
Well, Sally, a very good evening, and a good evening to our viewers at eNCA. Indeed, this does complicate the issue because, remember, if Parliament tomorrow votes against this report, the question is, will there be an opportunity to bring back this report again to Parliament? Of course, there might be an opportunity when the President, let's say, if his review was to fail. But are these two processes joined? I don't think so, and that's why it seems even the National Executive Committee of the ANC is, counseling its members of Parliament to vote against the report. But again, as you heard earlier, Sally, there was a press briefing by the EFF, and they said that if irrationally there is
ago, we knew that the President was preparing to resign. It's clear. The decision now is fight, fight, fight. You're making such an important point that the NEC is basing its decision to oppose that report on the fact that the President is taking this matter to review. I know you've had a chance to look through those papers, and essentially, and please fill in the gaps here for me, it seems the President is saying that the panel got it wrong, they misunderstood their mandate. I was responding merely to the actual defined 4 charges against me, which also in a way perhaps is a bit of an answer to the concern that there were very many holes in the President's response. The reality, of course, has been made clear. That panel dealt with 2 pieces of hearsay from the President and then from Arthur Fraser and the political parties who submitted that. What do you make of the affidavit?
Look, Sally, I describe it as a very big gamble that the President is taking, because if he were to lose that review, it would almost hamstring the political options available to him and to the African National Congress. As some people like Prof. Stephen Friedman wrote on his social media earlier today to say, why would you turn a political process into a legal process? Because if you take that report and it goes to Parliament and the ANC, scoffs it off the table, votes against it, the journey of that report dies and ends in Parliament, right? And it doesn't matter what your misgiving is or what your enthusiasm is about the report. If the report is not allowed to proceed to the next stage, which is the establishment of the impeachment committee, then that report dies politically. Then the President carries on. Seems as if the President is finicky about a number of issues. One, aggrieved clearly by the conclusion reached by the report and how it shows him up. But the conclusion of the report is not a charge of guilt. The President is beginning to behave like somebody who's guilty of something. He's not being tainted as guilty of those 4 separate charges that there has been a recommendation on. All that report establishes is to say, well, if you are going to proceed with the process of an impeachment committee, there are the 4 key issues that committee needs to satisfy itself on through an investigative process, because the terms of reference of the Section 89 panel were such that they could not even receive oral evidence and therefore could not be even an opportunity for cross-examination and all of that. So it's not an investigative report, and I think this is where the gamble for me is for the President. If you look at that affidavit, he talks about how the panel went beyond its terms of reference. The methodology that they used was not to that which is required. But what the Constitutional Court will solve for, one, this is a parliamentary process. Secondly, they would want to say, on the basis of information placed before former Chief Justice Sandile Ngcobo and others, does the final conclusion / recommendation match what was in the information? The ordinary person, Sally, has been saying in the country, the president clearly has something to answer for. One, he was evasive at the start. Secondly, he relied too much on process and didn't want to explain himself. Thirdly, said the matter is before the public protector, and therefore he's sort of barred from making public pronouncements on this. But when it was politically relevant for him, he went to the National Executive Committee of the ANC and made his opening political remarks in that gathering to be about addressing the Phala Phala issue to the ANC. And some people have said the president appears to be more concerned about explaining himself to the ANC rather than explaining himself to the country. So I think overall, in terms of how he has handled this issue and the inconsistencies in some of his utterances about Phala Phala, they do make a point that the president must be investigated. He said in Limpopo provincial conference, you guys know I trade in animals. Some of you have bought animals from me. We then need to ask, is the president in gainful activity outside of his state salary, which would be an injury to the Constitution? There's no doubt that those things must be investigated. Whether or not the Constitutional Court will find in his favor, I think it's a big gamble.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lukhona Mnguni. And of course, let's not forget that there are multiple probes into this issue. So even if the parliamentary panel is stopped in its tracks at this point, perhaps through the Hawks, SARS, Reserve Bank, the Public Protector probe, or even the ANC's own Integrity Committee, we will get some of those answers. Thank you so much, Lukhona Mnguni. Plenty more on this.